We usually think of science as this process of proving things right, of confirming our best ideas. But what if I told you the real secret sauce, the real power of science, is actually its ability to prove things wrong? Today, we're going to dig into something called deductive falsification. It's this incredibly rigorous, logical way that science gets rid of bad ideas, and by doing that, actually fails its way forward.
And that really gets us to the central mystery we're exploring. How is it possible? How can one single tiny observation, one little piece of data that just doesn't quite fit, have the power to bring down a huge, elegant theory that people have believed for ages? It sounds crazy, but it's the very engine that drives science.
So let's talk about how you actually break a theory. To get how theories fall, you first have to realize that they're built to be broken. This isn't some accident. Falsification isn't about passively finding a flaw, it's an active, aggressive hunt for what's wrong.
Yeah, see, progress isn't just about piling up facts that support your favorite idea. It's about deliberately looking for that one killer fact that could tear it all down. It's by relentlessly stress testing our ideas against reality and being brave enough to toss out the ones that don't make the cut that we inch closer to a better picture of how the universe actually works.
Now, to do this in a systematic way, we need to see how a theory is built. It's not just one big statement. Think of it more like a ladder, with different rungs or levels of ideas, where each one depends on the one above it. And there's a formal name for this whole ladder idea: levels of universality. It's just a way of organizing scientific claims based on how broad they are. You start with these giant, sweeping laws about all of nature, and you work your way down to a super-specific prediction about one thing, at one place, at one time.
Okay, so look at how this ladder breaks down. At the tippy top, you've got your universal laws. These are the big bedrock assumptions. From those, you logically deduce more specific theories. And then, at the very bottom, you get to the testable predictions. These are the concrete claims that, hey, that planet will be at that exact spot at 10 p.m. tonight. This bottom rung, this is where the rubber meets the road. It's the only part we can actually go out and test.
So, we've got our ladder of ideas. Great. Now we need the tool to break a rung. And for this, science borrows a powerful, absolutely escapable weapon from classical logic. I like to think of it as a logic hammer. That hammer is called modus tollens. And I know, the name sounds super academic and complicated, but the idea behind it is incredibly simple, and man, is it powerful. It's basically a rule that lets us take one failed prediction from the bottom of the ladder and use it to shatter the entire theory all the way at the top. Okay, let's walk through how this hammer works. It all starts with a simple if-then premise. We take our whole theoretical system, the big laws, the starting data, all of it, and we say, all right, let's just assume for a second that this whole setup is true. So, if that whole system is true, then it has to follow, like night follows day, that a specific prediction we got from it must also be true. The link is ironclad. The theory logically implies the prediction. There's just no way around it. And here it is, the moment of truth. We go out, we make our observation, we run the experiment, and we find out the prediction was wrong. Reality just didn't match what the theory said would happen. The event didn't happen. And that leads us to the devastating conclusion. Because that prediction was false, the theoretical system that absolutely required it to be true, well, that system must be false too. If the then part is wrong, the if part has to be wrong. The logic is inescapable. The hammer falls, and the theory is falsified. All right, enough with the abstract logic. Let's see how this plays out in the real world. Because this isn't just some philosopher's game. It's how science has actually worked for hundreds of years. And there's no better example than the astronomer Johannes Kepler and his epic struggle to figure out the orbit of Mars. So Kepler, just like pretty much every smart person before him, started with this beautiful, elegant idea at the top of his ladder. All planets move in perfect circles. It was this fundamental, widely accepted belief about how the cosmos was designed. So, using this main circular orbit rule and combining it with the best data he had on where Mars was at a certain time, what we call the initial conditions, Kepler was able to do the math and deduce a very specific, very testable prediction about where Mars should show up in the sky at a later date. And here is that epic showdown with reality. Kepler's system predicted Mars would be right over here, at position X. But when he looked through his instruments, nope. The actual observation showed Mars was clearly over at position Y.
The prediction was in direct conflict with what he could see with his own eye.
The prediction failed. The consequence was false. And so the logic hammer of modus tollens came crashing down. The entire system Kepler had built, including his beloved idea of perfect circles, was just logically proven to be wrong by one stubborn little red dot in the night sky.
But wait, this is where things get really, really interesting. Because falsification is powerful, for sure, but it also comes with its own puzzle. It screams at you that your system is broken, but it doesn't tell you exactly which part went wrong.
So does that just mean Kepler's circular orbit idea was wrong, and that's it? Case closed? Problem solved? Well, not quite. The actual day-to-day work of science is a little bit messier than that.
And this is the critical takeaway. Modus tollens doesn't act like a fine-toothed scalpel, precisely removing the one bad idea. It's more like a bomb. It refutes the entire system of statements you used to make the prediction, the big theory, the initial data, any hidden assumptions, the whole shebang.
That failed test only tells you that at least one thing in your chain of logic is false. Now, was it the big theory about circles? Almost certainly, in this case. But it could have been a tiny error in the data about Mars's starting position. Or maybe there was an assumption about how the measurement tools work that was off. Logic alone can't point its finger at the specific culprit.
And this is where the real work of being a scientist kicks in. Falsification is the fire alarm that tells you something's wrong. But the investigation that comes next, that detective work of hunting down the real source of the failure and then proposing a better alternative, like when Kepler eventually figured out planets move in ellipses, that's the real engine of progress.
So that leaves us with this final, fascinating question to think about. If a single failed test logically breaks your entire system, how do scientists ever figure out which specific part is the problem and how to fix it? That leap from a logical nope to a new, better theory? Well, that's not just logic anymore. That's the art behind the science.